Welcome to Be Our Guesty, Adapting Your Business Model to Ensure Longevity Post-Pandemic. My name is Vera Raviv Schwartz, President and COO of Guesty. Before we begin, I'd like to mention a few reminders. Be sure to grant all necessary audio permissions so we can hear you. On the other hand, remember that we cannot hear you. However, you can hear us, but we can't hear you. However, we encourage you to submit questions throughout the panel. You can do that by clicking on the Q&A box below, typing your question and submitting it. We will be recording this event and sharing it later via email for later access. I'd like to welcome and thank our amazing panelists with me here today. Simon Lehman, co-founder and CEO of AJL Consulting, Pierre Besserel, CEO of Transparent, and Tim Spacer, co-founder of Buoy. Thank you everyone for taking the time to join us. In terms of our agenda today, we'll begin with some introductory remarks from me about Guesty and how we experienced COVID-19 so far and our projections going forward, followed by discussions led by AJL Consulting, Transparent, and Buoy on adapting your business models for longevity at this challenging time. At the end of those presentations, we'll have a panel discussion with our three panelists, and we'll end with some time for Q&A. I know some of you have already presented Q&A for the panel. You're welcome to do so throughout the panel, throughout these discussions, and we will address them at the end of the panel. A few words about Guesty to begin with. For those of you who are not familiar with Guesty, we're a software platform for short-term property management. We're an end-to-end solution for simplifying the complex operational needs of short-term rental property management, including the demand side, channel management, calendar management, guest communications, automation, data analytics, so on and so forth, a very robust solution. And to complement our offering, we have a robust marketplace with over 80 technology partners. Two of them are with me here today, providing anything from smart home automation, data, dynamic pricing, and so on and so forth. Again, really creating a one-stop shop for property management in short-term rentals. In terms of COVID-19, what we've seen with our clients is that it has resulted in new travel personas and also a change in guest expectations resulting from that. In terms of the personas we see is displaced travelers, people that all of a sudden need a short-term rental because they meant to fly home and couldn't. We see a lot of people heading out of the major cities to rural areas. It could be for the purpose of isolation or quarantines. It could also be in terms of finding a better space that's more quiet, has more space, has a backyard, especially families with children. We've seen a lot of that going on in the past couple of months. In addition to that, we see healthcare and frontline workers looking for short-term availability. Another new persona that we haven't experienced before is business workers who actually are looking for a better work from home environment. They want to have more space, they want to have a balcony, and they're looking for a daily short-term rental to help them work in a better manner. All that is resulting in guests looking for longer stays. And these longer stays resulted in an uptick in flexible inventory business models, which we will discuss later today. I believe you also, Airbnb's monthly stays program being introduced, which they claim has resulted in an uptick of 20% in longer stays compared to last year. For us, we see that 80% of hosts now expect longer stays. 50% are giving guests a discount on stays of over 28 days. Even with our platform at Guesty, we've seen the average stay double in Corona days from 4.5 days to 9 days, A lot of it is a result of the monthly stays, etc. And we also see increased length of stay for the remainder of the year, meaning even people looking at their fall and winter vacations are reserving on average longer stays than in the past. We want to talk about incorporating extended stays into your business model. We think it's something that you should be considering these days. And you can see a link here to our blog post with some recommendations in that respect. To mention just a few, we recommend pricing smartly, understanding that people are looking for discounts when they're reserving for 30 days compared to 3 days. We see discounts starting from 10% for those longer durations. We recommend automating guest communications and making sure that your guests, even through a monthly stay, feel that guest experience that you're covering for them. Tell them how you intend to help them with cleaning processes during that period. See if you can help them otherwise during their stay, etc. Another idea is to centralize all bookings in one multi-calendar, both your short and midterm, so you can really play with the different models and be very flexible. And another thing we're suggesting is to offer rental agreement to guests booking for longer stays because it is customer, because it gives you better control and better fraud prevention. All those tools, of course, are available on the Guesty platform. I would also like to refer you to our Coronavirus Infra Center, where you can find a lot of tools, information, and articles about how to mitigate coronavirus impact, get information about different locations, about pricing, and much more. Another last referral I would like to make is our latest industry report, State of the Short-Term Rental Industry Amid COVID-19, where Guesty has surveyed 400 different property managers for short-term rentals across the world and came up with a lot of interesting insights about how they're coping with COVID-19 and what are their projections for the future. Two of the most helpful strategies to maintain business stability that we've seen amongst the surveyed short-term property managers was a flexible cancellation policy. 22% of them changed their cancellation policy to be more appealing to guests. And the second one, reduced daily rates. 18% have actually changed the rates to accommodate guests during this period. Less positive thing we've seen in the survey is that 51 to 75% reduction in your revenue for 2020 is expected amongst almost 30% of the respondents, and that's a lot. We only saw 5% of respondents saying that they hardly had any revenue impact as a result of COVID-19. So only 5% had an impact of less than 10% on revenue. And we are all aware of the fact that it's going to be a challenging year for us, for the industry, for everyone. But I would like to end my remarks with some positivity. We do see recovery on the horizon. If we compare May numbers to April numbers, we see globally a 78% increase in new reservations, US leading the way with an increase of 83% in May compared to April, followed by Australia, 75%, also very impressive, and followed by recovery by some additional countries, France, UK, amongst those countries as well. We also see an increase in average nightly rates in some of those countries, which is another good sign of recovery. 47% increase in the US and 80% in France. One last positive note is the fact that fall and winter look promising. We see an uptick for winter holidays, meaning Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's Eve. And we see Labor Day pretty much comparable to Labor Day of last year. That is when we're looking at future reservations made until today for fall and winter. One last point is to mention Italy. We've all seen how Italy suffered, and we were very happy to see the beginning of a recovery in Italy. 140% increase in new reservations in May compared to April, with top 4 cities being Milan, Como, Genova, and Trieste. Of course, we're still a long way in Italy from the peak of before Corona times, but still it shows some nice signs of recovery. And also the average length of stay is 9 days compared to 4 days on average pre-COVID. So I hope that I leave you with some positive signs of the future, and I will let our expert, Simon Lehman, co-founder and CEO of AJL Consulting, share with us his insights on where the industry is going and how business models will be changing as a result of COVID-19. Simon, take it away.
Thank you very much, Vered. Thank you, Guesty, for having us today. Very exciting for us, and great to see so many attendants and great introduction. And it's great to see that we're seeing some silver lining on the horizon, which we can only confirm in what is going on in the market right now. We see definitely some very positive signs. And for certain markets, I guess, mainly the urban markets, it will be a rather tough year. For sure. So what we would like to speak about in the next few minutes is about, how do we see the technology landscape evolving in this crisis? And for that, we have made public our thesis in how we look at the vacation rental ecosystem, where we come from food chain to value chain, and sort of look at what is our value chain today and how is that going to evolve going forward within the vacation rental industry. So one thing that I'm sort of reminding many times our customers and our audience is we're in a very simple business. We do believe we're in a simple business because we're actually connecting owners with guests. That's all we do, and that's pretty simple if you think about it. We do believe that the ownership of supply will remain in individual ownership, predominantly homeowners, and we do not believe that institutional homeowners will own large amounts of supply going forward. So we will always deal with secondary homeowners, very, very fragmented supply market, and we're connecting them with guests, with the technology and everything we do in between, and we have made it extremely complex. So first of all, we started with our own website, and we required a PMS as well to actually do our daily tasks before we even started to do that with Excel. And now we need somewhat a way of how we can manage our bookings and have our own webpage. But things got more complicated. So OTAs came into the game. So you needed to connect to different distributors while you're driving direct traffic from Google. You also started to integrate with companies like Booking, Airbnb, VRBO, Expedia, and others to do your distribution. So therefore, you got room for channel managers to come into the space to actually start connecting your distribution with these channels, because maintaining integration of channels is something very challenging, and therefore channel managers make that a lot easier with integrations onto multiple channels for you to have further reach. So not enough complexity, meta search companies started to come into the game, apart from Holiday, Home2Go, just to mention a few with Kayak as well. And some of them have already disappeared, like Tripping, which has been acquired. So metas are also there and give you additional reach for your product. We believe, considering that 80% of the demand is coming from from OTAs, it's amazing, and therefore you need more things to actually navigate your business. So revenue management companies came into the game, business intelligence and data companies came into the game, and then we started to verticalize the hell out of our value proposition. So our value chain connecting owners with guests have become super highly complex. So we have meta search companies to deal with. We have channel manager. We have revenue management system. We have business intelligence and data companies such as Transparent with Pierre, who is attending today. And then we have companies with home automation, operations software, RBO technology, website builders, then the PMS is in the middle. And the question here is there enough space for everybody? We have massive complexity in our industry, and what is going to happen going forward? We have ancillary services like companies like Luggage Hero and Stasher, who offer additional services for the traveler, guest communications, direct marketing, and. So we have a massive market fragmentation when it comes to supply and technology as well, and we have massive margin compression. So we're facing margin compression by the OTAs because we give our demand to third parties instead of managing our demand ourselves and drive direct bookings. So our margin has been compressed heavily because let's take a 30% average take rate on a gross margin booking. We give 50% of that away before we even have addressed our technology challenges. And our technology challenges have become absolutely mind-boggling when you look at the verticalization of the vacation rental industry. And here is only just a few that we're showing here. And therefore, we need to pay those as well. A lot of these are startups, venture capital funded. You know, some of them were lucky enough to have been good funded private to pre-COVID, and others haven't. So we do believe that our consolidation is going to happen, while a lot of these players across the value chain want to expand their value proposition and own more of the value chain going forward, you know, being that house automation, being that in property manager, in revenue management system, and of course PMSs who sit in the center of the value proposition, who will expand their take across the value chain to make it simple for property manager to have more one-stop shopping approach, and without property managers having to deal with technology, because we all know when we ask property managers what are their biggest challenges, it's maintaining supply and growing supply and dealing with owners, number one. Number two, it's the complexity of technology. And obviously now post-COVID, it's also profitability. And that's something we need to keep in mind, because we have all realized that within an impact of COVID, not many, like a lot of companies have not survived it and have only had oxygen for maybe 14 or 21 days before they went totally out of business, because they only had one demand channel. So if you build your business on the back, for example, of an Airbnb, and the demand is ceasing entirely, then you have a big problem. So I think now we need to reconsider what does that mean for me as a property manager? Do I spread my wings as far as I can in terms of supply demand generation, and also do I start simplifying my technology stack in order to run my business efficiently going forward? Just a snapshot, you know, just looking at PMSs, we've just picked out a few that are out there. So the choice is big. If we look at the verticalization of each supplier there and the different category, it's amazing how many companies are out there in the different vertical across the value chain. And each of them want to make money. Are they going to make money? That's to be seen. But we do believe that consolidation will start to happen, because there is not enough take rate of 50% of the margin that is remaining for technology companies across the entire value proposition. So margin compression we talked about. It's going to be interesting how this is going to evolve going forward. We're watching it very closely. And in the future, we'll be more than happy to assist you in choosing your strategy and looking at the technology overall. And with that, I would like to close. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon. Enlightening as ever. And there's a lot to discuss following this presentation. I will now pass the torch to Pierre of Transparent to tell us about his data-driven insights as far as COVID goes, and as far as his recommendations on pricing strategies and additional strategies for our property managers.
Thanks everyone for joining today. I'm just going to do a small recap. So, you know, Vered said a few words about our company. Just for those who don't know us yet, we're a data company in vacation rentals. What we do is we track 34 million listings worldwide, and we aggregate reservations from our partners so we can produce insights on inventory, on occupancy and rates, as well as on origins of travelers. So I'm just going to go really briefly over this, but so you know, we've got a special COVID page on seetransparent.com that you can access, where we've got a lot of market data that we refresh on a weekly basis. So if you haven't seen that, you can go on seetransparent.com and check out. We've got some free content out there. Actually, some of this is presented online, but I think with the voiceover, it's always a little bit better. So I'm going to just present some of what we've recently published here. Is the percentage change of reservation from 2019 to 2020. By country. So what you can see here is that overall, we could see that we've sort of reached the inflection point at the end of the week 14, which is obviously a great news. Not all of the market have rebounded the same way. And I know we see a lot of articles. Basically, you know, this is not yet recovery. We are halfway through. For instance, the US is are around 50% below last year. And we've got, countries like the UK that are still quite down, as they haven't really passed the health crisis and the lockdown are still in place, right? So slowly at the end of the lockdown, specifically, end of April, we started seeing more reservations coming, and this is by which pace. So this needs to be moderated, because that not necessarily reflect the amount of revenue generated, and I'll explain in a minute why is that. So obviously, like I mentioned, this is not going on the same pace everywhere. So we're publishing on a bi-weekly basis some maps, so you can see which are the regions in Europe and the US mostly that are recovering faster. So if your region is in there, you can have a look at it directly, or you can reach out if it's not, and we can try to look it for you. I think something interesting as well is we like to compare by OTAs to see where the OTAs are in terms of recovery. You can see that they're following exactly the same path as the rest of the industry. With something interesting, I think Airbnb's got a bit of a head start in the recovery, probably because they've got a broader inventory, probably than Expedia and Booking.com, and they've got an audience that that have been able to recover faster the path to reservation. So I think that's something interesting. And I've added these slides. Sorry, it's a little bit messy, but it's just some statistics that we pulled out of SimilarWeb. So I don't know if you guys know SimilarWeb. It's a very interesting website where you estimate the traffic of a website. And I've pulled out some numbers from my archives and from what is right now on the web, trying to compare year on year the amount of traffic on these websites. So, looking at the traffic on Airbnb, for instance, it's down 50% versus last year. And what I think is interesting is VRBO and HomeAway is doing better than others, having recovered much faster. So these are just estimates from SimilarWeb, but I think it's quite interesting to see, traffic-wise, in terms of how many people go on to the OTAs, we're still quite significantly down versus last year at the same time, okay? And this is all public data. I mean, you can also look it up yourself on SimilarWeb and find also some more specific channels that you might be interested in. I just think it's a nice exercise to do. Cancellation was a big thing. During March, the high time of the COVID crisis, if you want, we saw the biggest wave ever of reservation globally. So obviously this slowly went smoother. It started in urban markets and a couple of weeks later into the leisure market. Here we've got some outlying because it was driven by some regions that we track. But overall, we're becoming to a more normal level, but I would say there's still some cancellations. I think travelers are still very much driven by what they read in the press, and we hear from our clients that there are still quite a lot of cancellations out there. So we're still not over with this era of being used to seeing cancellations. And also driven by the fact that now, like you said, Vera, there's more flexible also policies. Inventory-wise, we have seen a small decrease, but it's nothing catastrophic. It's not like 50% of the properties have shifted to long-term. At least most of the inventory is still on the OTAs. So this is still, this is a month old, but we've got new data showing that we're also remaining, maintaining most of the supply. And I think, like everyone can imagine, you don't want to lose your reviews online, so you don't kill the listing page, you maintain it, even though you might be doing some work. So you try to do some midterm, you try to diversify during this time, but the listings are still out there. So very much less demand, but pretty much the same amount of at least advertised inventory. Another thing that you mentioned, Vered, is the length of stay. So this is global data, and this is length of stay by date of the reservation. So it's not by dates of check-in, but I think it's interesting to see that we still have quite high lengths of stay. So we're not where we were during the crisis. To be fair, during the week 15, there were so few reservations that the few ones that were made was much longer. Now we've got a bigger volume, and we're around 5.5 nights in average, where we were around 3.8 last year, 3.5 last year. So still 2 days extra. And it's not really that lengths of stay have increased. Not only, it's also that just the short stays have disappeared, right? You're not going to do now a weekend trip. You might book it for later this year or next year, but there is much less demand for these short trips, and that's why it's driven lengths of stay higher, right? So I think that's something important to take into account. Then obviously domestic travel. This is something that we all looking at because of restriction to travel internationally. So this is data last year. Our estimates in terms of where the guests came from by OTAs. And I think, some OTAs like HomeAway, VRBO are better positioned for domestic travel. VRBO, for instance, the US is super strong locally. They drive a lot of local demand. VRBO in France with Ab Retail is quite strong as well, driving local travelers. So these are interesting things. I think they're well positioned. Airbnb also, has got some nice volume of local demand. So interesting to see who's well positioned for that. And it's actually something we've already seen in the market. I've just put 3 examples here. So Vered and Abby are both in Tel Aviv. So I put the Tel Aviv example here, where we've got, right now 47% of the demand that have been tracked lately that has been domestic. So you could see since 2019 it was around 10% months on months, and now we're basically 5 times higher of terms of domestic, and it makes sense. And then this is overall in Portugal, same thing. We passed from 10% domestic. Portugal is a big receiver of travelers as a country, and now they've got obviously during this period 60% of domestic travel. And then London, obviously, that is still right in the pandemic, if you want, with the health situation still being critical. And in that sense, the domestic travel here is also leading the way. So these are just a few slides I wanted to share. There's much more on, online, and also always happy to have a chat one-on-one if anyone wants to share some thoughts about their own markets. And that'll be it for me. So Tim, I'll let you take the stage. I'm just going to stop sharing here.
All right, thank you so much. Today, I'm going to teach you guys how I approach responsive revenue management. And all that means is responding to the industry as it is right now, as opposed to, looking at historicals or doing any of those much more traditional revenue management practices that I spent an awful long time studying only to have them completely go out the window during COVID. So really, there's only 2 principles that you need to remember when you're applying this methodology. Number 1, think like a guest. And number 2, trust your gut. So most of you are already doing these things. That's totally fantastic. Let's walk through each of the details. So first of all, if I'm a guest, I go to a popular website, Airbnb. We all know it. We've all been there. And, I'm looking for a home in Santa Monica, California for, June 19th through 21st. So, I get some results here. I see they are all indeed in the area that I want to stay. And then I look here. So let's see if we can decide which of these homes is the most likely to be booked. It is super obvious. Like behavioral economics tells us one of these homes is definitely going to be booked more often than the others. So if you're looking at this and you're like, Timmy, I can't make a decision. There's an important part of the calculation missing. You're absolutely right. This is indeed a trick question. We are missing the rates. So why do I do this very obvious thing? I do it to remind you that your rate is part of an advertisement. So I'm going to say it again. Your rate is part of an advertisement. It's not a reflection of your projections. It is not a reflection of historicals. It is none of those things. It is simply an advertisement to somebody who wants to buy a place right now. So let's go back. Let's look at the rates. Okay, now this is going to make a lot more sense. And if we zoom in here, we can say, okay, this one's out of my price range. It's bigger than I want. No problem. Glad I saw it. Don't want to book it. This one, 179, definitely in my price range. But I don't feel like the value is quite as good because I have this cheaper place that is marked down from a higher rate. Not only that, if I look at this home over here, I see it's marked down from an even higher rate. It used to be priced as expensively as the home I rejected. Not only that, but I have this handy prompt telling me that it is a scarce resource. So behavioral economics tells us that with a large enough sample size, this home is just going to get booked more often. That's why Airbnb does that. So not only that, on the listing, but they also are going to follow up using an email. And in this email, they're going to talk about how time is running out, starting to turn up the pressure because I didn't confirm the booking the first time through. Next, they're going to include a bunch of top rated homes in the area so I can rest assured that I'm getting a decent place. And if you're looking at this and thinking, hold on, something's not adding up here, you're right. This one only has 2 reviews. It's front and center, only 2 reviews. It doesn't even have a review score. How are they calling it a top rated home? Well, this is a home that I helped my buddy set up, and I put it in my cart to walk him through the purchase path. And so Airbnb remembers, and they're insisting it back into my perception here. So then they follow up with yet another email. And this one, they really crank up the pressure. So, get these deals, great deals right now. book now before others snatch them up. Just, I have to say, primo copywriting Airbnb. Amazing, amazing. I love it. And then not only that, but they follow up with some more listings that are near the one that I had in my cart. They have the amenity that I specifically searched, and also they anchor the rate once again, telling me that there's a discount. So if you're paying attention at home, that is value anchoring, product scarcity, persistence, time scarcity, social proof, persistence again, value anchoring again, competition, and personalization. I expect nothing less from a multi-billion-dollar marketing company, right? So if you're asking yourself, how do I make the OTAs do that for me? And it's not just Airbnb, they all have these mechanisms to do it. Like, this is how part of how they compete with each other. This is part of how they sell your product. So remember, first, we just had to think like a guest. Number two, trust your gut. So what does that mean? If you're like me, when you're setting up your very, very first apartment or, condo, whatever it is, for me, it was a dingy little studio apartment in a basement in Chicago. You think, okay, how can I set my rates? Well, most people intuitively choose a responsive revenue management practice when they very first set their rates. You have to be trained how to use historicals. You have to be trained how to do projections. You don't have to be trained how to think like a guest and respond to the market. So, number one, establish your current environment. Just look around, see how homes are priced around you. Number two, have lower rates in the near term. Number three, higher rates in the long term. And number four, higher rates for special events. And if you say, Timmy, like, I'm already doing that and I've been doing that since day one, I say, congratulations, you are practicing the appropriate revenue management methodology for COVID and honestly, for the next several years. It's going to be a while before we can rely on historical data from 1 year ago. 2021 is going to be all sorts of messed up, so we have to apply this methodology. So what does this look like in practice? Number one, go to transparent, best data in the business, get a sense of where your neighborhood is priced. Then go ahead, put it out on a timeline so you can see where your rates are going to be. This is a East Coast city. You can see little less expensive here at the beginning of July. People are trying to get competitive. Rate goes up to around $300 here. At the end of July, drops way down as it gets cold in this Eastern city. And so, number one, establish the current market rate. Boom, there we've got it. So I respond to that by setting my rate just like this. I understand that, we need more variance than the market average. So I apply that. That's all you're seeing here. Number two, lower rates in the short term. As time runs out and the booking window closes, I want to be really competitive. Easy peasy. Number three, higher rates in the long term. As we look at the holidays and stays like that could potentially have a really high value, I want to be priced competitively, especially because there's still an awful lot of time for people to book. So I will drop that rate as the booking window closes. And then number four, higher rates for special events. And if you're looking at this and you're saying, Timmy, like, nobody is going to book this place for $750 in the middle of September. I say, you're absolutely right. We're not doing it so people are going to book it. We're doing it because your nightly rate is part of an advertisement. And if you want the OTA to introduce that value anchoring, you have to anchor your rate. So on Airbnb, I'll set my rate super high and then schedule them to drop, because when they do, Airbnb then prompts, with the email and the discounts and like the special things on the listing, and like 2 equal listings where one has all of that stuff added, it's just more likely to be booked. And if you say, well, I'm not having trouble getting booked on Airbnb, like I do fine on that, I want to do better on booking.com and these other platforms, great, do the same thing. Just like apply the special discount that they want you to apply. They send you emails all the time saying, hey, do you want to opt into this discount? Do it. Make sure your rate was high initially, so that way you can provide a really big discount, because that's going to put you it's going to give you the best page rank result. So, depending on which OTA you're trying to increase reservations from, you either let the rate drop to get those prompts from Airbnb, or you opt into a special discount or a mobile rate or something to get the special rate on booking.com. So if you're wondering like how the rates were set before COVID, this is what I had set using a base price algorithm for this home in advance of COVID. So you can see where I was kind of thinking it might get booked initially, and you can see how the market has really responded. And so if you want to know, like, as you're getting all of these emails saying, hey, drop your rates at the last minute, you know, this is an idea of like how much you should drop your rates at the last minute. So to bring it all back to Guesty, if you want to do this, this is the Guesty multi-calendar over that exact same period of time, you know, July into June. So let's zoom into just the booking window of the next couple of weeks. If you want to drop your rates, you can do that really quickly here. These are 11 listings. And of course, I also highly suggest you drop your nightly minimum down as low as you can stand so you can increase your views. You can do that very simply in Guesty as well. If you want to talk more in detail about that stuff later, I'm happy to stick around and talk about it. So once again, think like a guest. Number 2, trust your gut. And thank you very much. I'm available if you have any questions.
Thank you, Tim, for the useful and practical presentation. I think it's very important for all of us at this time to think about pricing strategies. And now we will begin our panel discussion with Simon, Pierre, and Tim. And I'd like to open with a question to all of you. We talked a lot about flexible rentals and extended stays. What would be your number one tip for property managers thinking to diversify their offering in those ways during this time? Simon, let's start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I found very interesting, Vered, when you showed us the new personas of Guesty, I found that interesting. And one was to look for a different home office. Maybe I should do that too with 5 kids at home. So that's get out of the home, but not being in an office would be is an ideal solution. No, I think it's a super hard question. You know, in terms of diversification, I would suggest not to diversify too much because, you know, also in terms of inventory, but again, it really depends. Are you an STR in an urban space? Are you a short-term rental, vacation rental company in leisure? I think that differs in terms of answer. You know, what you suggest for somebody short-term. I think if you're an urban short-term, you look at longer stays, you look at diversifying your product offering probably quite considerably. Because we also believe at AJL that urban will take a lot longer to recover than the leisure destinations do, and we have some customers that have already achieved revenues of the entire last year until the end of May, because the demand is just crazy. I mean, booking a vacation rental in Switzerland, which we do this year, the first time for a long time, everything is fully booked. So I think if you're a leisure operator, I would be very careful of doing something, you know, just by hip shooting and adjusting a strategy. I think you need to be very wise on pricing, also take your costs into consideration to maximize revenues and profits. I think now it's about creating profits, creating safety, and therefore I think I would spend a lot more time on actually the business strategy in itself than really adjusting the product, to be perfectly honest.
Pierre, what do you think? Anything you would suggest to?
Yeah, I'd agree with Simon. At the end of the day, you gotta focus on, you know, what you do well. This is a crisis of demand, so eventually diversifying, you know, it's not, you can't say I'm going to move to another location. You know, you're working where you're working. What you can try to do is find ways. I mean, find, if you want, source of demand that you may not have looked into the past. So if you can track into any corporate stays, or, you know, we talked a lot about the midterm rental, but if you want to diversify a little bit part of your portfolio and maybe put, you know, 10% of your property on a more longer, you know, rental mode, that's also something you could do. There's like platforms that you can do that with. For instance, you know, we have a list on our website, and I know you also at Guesty have some connection with them. So I'd say look at, you know, companies like Spota Home, Nestpeak, Housing Anywhere, etc. To try to get this extra demand, maybe to diversify part of your portfolio. But at the end, I agree with Simon. You got to focus on what you do well, and it's time to do so, as it's, you know, we're getting back to the demand path.
Tim, any comments? And also, how do you balance out the pricing with the length of stay?
Yeah, so I I think Pierre said it right. Like, you need to focus, you know, like as Simon's presentation showed us, like there's a lot of complex stuff going on right now. And if you try to diversify, like you're probably learning, you know, some new stuff. There's a learning curve, there's onboarding, all of that kind of stuff that you have to do in order to like bring on a new channel or like pursue a different type of business. And it may be like the learning curve may take you longer than the recovery, you know? And so like by the time you start getting good at that type of business, you know, your old business model is more relevant again. So I say, my recommendation is to take this time and focus as much as possible. Get rid of anything that's not like helping and making things more efficient. Consolidate, you know, as much as you can, and figure out like operationally how you can make your operations as lean and smooth as possible. Because all of these ideas are great. Like even the revenue management, like rate setting approach that I laid out, that's all great, but it's an awful lot to manage. And if you miss a couple of those peak dates or something like that, then like you feel really dumb because, you know, you went unbooked simply because you forgot about your rate. So that's something that can happen if you try to get too cute, or if you like, you know, just like try to, you know, squeeze water out of the stone. And so I say like focus, remember what you're good at, and try to get better at it even in the short term. To answer your question quickly on rate and length of stay setting, I recommend that you set your length of stay as low as you can, like 2 in the near term, 3 in the long term for urban, 3 in the near term, 4 in the long term for leisure. But then you match that with a higher rate variance, because a higher rate variance is going to disincentivize short stays and incentivize long stays, because the 3-night stay over the peak dates is more expensive than a comparable 3-night stay in your same area, but your 5-night stay is going to be cheaper. And if any, I have an illustration to show that later, but you know, using that approach, you can increase your page rank by having more views through the lower length of stay, the lower length of stay minimum. But the length of stay is actually determined by guest behavior and your position versus the competition in the market. So I don't recommend that like you put really long length of stay on, or length of stay minimums or anything like that. You know, I know that there's an instinct to say things are crazy, I just want to get somebody in this unit and like make it to 2021. I totally get that. But you know, I saw in Dallas, we had a moment where we panicked a little bit at the beginning of COVID. We set a 5-night length of stay, and then we got all of these long stays, and we were like, yay, this is great. And then the market started responding, and we were like, no, we're stuck with these low ADRs. So I say just like, you know, the math has not changed as far as like the number of, the volume of searches is going to increase with the shorter length of stay that you have. Like that's just math. So keep working with that. Rely on those principles. Focus on the things that got you here. That's my advice in general.
And Vered, maybe if I can jump in real quick, you ask about, you know, pricing by length of stay. Just as an example, we made a research, and basically for 7-night stay, people offer an average on Airbnb 12% discount. For 15-day stay, people also offer 12% discount. And for 30-day stay, the average discount offer is 22%. And that changes by market. So for instance, in Rome, people offer an average 30% for the monthly stays. And we have a full list. So if you want to have a look at that, we can also share it out later.
Great. I think that will be very interesting for our audience. Thank you so much, Pierre. Simon, you talked about consolidation in the tech space, something I find personally very interesting.
Oh, you really?
But so you talked about the reasoning behind it, I understand, but can you map out for us, how do you see the industry consolidating? What does it mean post-COVID? How do you think that it will play out?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, at the end of the day, whoever I'm going to say that to, for me, this is only logic, right? In terms of value creation. So we can take a super simplistic approach and say, hey, there's too many players for too small of a piece of a pie. Simple as that. So if you're not able to increase your take rate, your gross margin by doing more direct bookings versus third-party distribution, you are stuck with margin compression. Whereas the competition that is out in the market will not allow you to increase your take rate with owners and whatever, because owners have too much choice today. You know, we have RBO platforms, we have OTAs, so owners have become more educated. Either they use a property manager, a professional property manager to run the property, or they do it themselves. But you know, the owners have become pretty educated and see what choices that they have. So, and then if you look at the verticalization of the value chain, and you know, interesting enough, when I talk about this, if you know, from my previous time at Focusrite, we're looking at the online travel space. We have not fixed it. I mean, the verticalization in online travel is even worse. It's just like everybody takes a mini piece of the value chain and trying to make a business out of it. It's just become too crowded. So it's a very simplistic approach to say it's going to consolidate, because a lot of venture capital has flown into, let's say, post HomeAway, post Airbnb hype, creating all this demand and supply growing like crazy, because marketplaces such as the large OTAs have created so much demand, you couldn't do anything wrong. And then all these tech companies said, I want a piece of that. But now, while everybody needs to make some money and have a certain take rate across this value chain to actually survive, and not many have that. So it's only logic that this is going to consolidate. So everybody is trying to expand on the value proposition, expand its technology to have a more stickiness. Because when you remember my presentation with all these different players across the value chain, there's only one single thing that these guys have in common. They have the same customer. So you can imagine a property manager can see 20 guys a day and just talk about each piece of his value chain, and everybody wants to sell him something. And I think, and we believe as a consultant, without going into details, who is going well, who is not going well, who's going broke, who doesn't, who is well funded, who is not. I think for us it's more, this cannot work out. So therefore the natural result of that is it's going to consolidate, and people will expand its offering across the value proposition.
it could be expanding through the value chain, right? So you'll have one vendor offering a more robust offering, or it could be small competitors being swollen by the larger competitors. I mean, do you see a lot of the niches consolidating, or do you see
Absolutely. I think, Vered, we're seeing both. Okay. I mean, we already have started to see that. So within the PMS space, we have seen the smallers disappearing, not being able to survive with the take rate that they have generated, and being gobbled up by larger ones, and either disappearing or merging with others. So in terms of the sectors, we see both. So we see the ones who actually will consolidate into the sector, while others are trying to expand its value proposition. And you know, interesting enough, we're obviously doing quite a bit of M&A work as well, and financial advisory work, and we see now a lot of opportunists out there who want to gobble up some technology and say, hey, we can tuck that in, we want to own more of the value proposition at the end of the day. But to your question, it's both.
Thank you, Simon. Pierre, I think the question everybody's asking themselves is, okay, so we're seeing signs of optimism, but what does it really mean? So in terms of your predictions, when you look at the data, do you have a sense of when we'll go back to normal numbers, or what will be your indicators that property management can go to their normal practices because we're over that big dip?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I don't have a, like a crystal ball, and I can't see into the future. And I think data sometimes is tricky because basically it's, averages, and it hides a lot of outliers. So what you don't see is that a lot of people have gone out of business during the period, by out of businesses, they had to fire literally 100% of their staff. And this is something you may not see in the data. Same thing when you see the recovery by country. You may not see that some regions are still under a lot of stress and they haven't seen really the recovery. And it's a bit unfair to look at the averages because some regions on the other side are maybe doing even better than before, right? So it will really depend about markets. Like the big segment we always look at is sort of urban market versus leisure. I think the positive news is we're seeing some level of demand as well in urban markets. So in Spain, just for instance, Talking to a client the other day in Sevilla, I was quite happy with the number of reservations coming compared to, the worst of the crisis. So you can start to see some of that happening. It's just going to be, very hard to have everything go back to normal at the same time, right? So I would say looking at where demand is coming back is important, and I would also say I don't know when it's gonna come back to normal, but I would definitely recommend to get ready for potentially another one, because the specialists said it could be another breakout in October, November. I think pretty much everybody now knows how to react quickly to a situation. But I think it's great that as an industry we can all prepare, so we're not taken by surprise. And if it does happen, in October, November, then our companies are protected and ready to go through another wave of that, which I think will be really, really hard on a lot of players in travel in general and in our vertical more specifically.
Thank you. That was very optimistic indeed.
No, I mean, I think it's important, I can't know. I would like to say, look, in September 15th, we're all back in business. Unfortunately,
no, I would like to jump on this where, in terms of optimistic, a lot of things that we have said around our conference. I mean, let's face it, guys. There's over 200 people online today. We are in the best travel vertical that we can be in. Full stop. I mean, it's just crazy, and we should cherish that. And we should do the max out of this. And sorry if I sound like an ambassador or a preacher, but hey, guys, I mean, I've been very deep in the travel industry all my life. I mean, there is so much suffering. Tour operators, travel agencies, there are hundreds and thousands of people losing their jobs, hotels. I mean, vacation rental. I mean, your data has shown that we're at the introduction. We are in the best travel vertical that there is, full stop. You don't want to be in airlines. You don't want to be in cruise ships. You don't want to be in hotels. We are the one. And now it's time to become professional and push this thing to the limit and convince more people who have never rented, which in the US is still 70%, to start rent. And that is everywhere around the world. So we could not be in a better position to do an amazing professional job to attract more. Vacation rental is the business to be in, next to bicycles.
Thank you, Simon, for that. Tim, I'm sure a lot of your clients have suffered a very difficult Q1. Can you give us tips on how you advise them to mitigate loss and how automation comes into play in that respect?
Yeah, so the people I work with are generally very, very automated anyway. It's the only way that you can survive as a decentralized cash flow business. So they worked to consolidate, and they worked to make their operations more efficient for sure. But to be honest, the teams just responded very, very quickly. Like, one example I remember is my client received an alert on his phone that colleges were closing in the area, and he was like, those kids have to stay somewhere, and they have to stay somewhere through the end of the semester. So right away, he went in and changed the first part of every listing description on all of his accounts to talk about special discounts for students. And so being able to respond very, very quickly, and then apply a length of stay discount, and then respond with a small deal to anybody who requested one, that really increased his conversion percentage, and was able to float through the toughest period of time, because he was able to capitalize on that the student demand the second that it happened. I'll also say there have been furloughs, there have been leaders foregoing their salary to maintain their staff. So there is an awful lot of pain, but I have been humbled and inspired by what my clients have been able to do in the face of overwhelming odds. And so, I truly understand, we're all in this together now. And the companies are coming out of it. The industry is coming back. Bookings are picking up, and they're going to make it to next year.
Wonderful. I want to ask another question to all of you and try to keep your answers short so we will have some time. And we will go overboard a bit to try to address the questions from the audience. But I do want each of you to tell me in a few sentences, what do you think the biggest change would be for the short-term rental industry pre and post-COVID? Simon, why don't we start with you?
Standards.
Standards?
Yeah, it's a short question, Vera. Then, it's become a swear word pre-COVID. We tried to address it in many VRMAs, and you remember when everybody brought up the discussion of standards, everybody was like, "Hey, we're individual. We don't need standards." And I think if we want to address these other 70% of travelers to rent, we need to start building standards. And I truly believe, being cleaning, whatever, do proper guest expectation management. We don't need star ratings like hotels. We never be. We're an individual business. We love the industry because of that. That you have always something, a different experience. But for certain things, we do need standards, and more than ever now. And I truly believe, and AJL Consulting also truly believes, that the standards cannot be owned by corporates. Standards can be owned by associations and by groups. So we need to stand much closer together as an entire industry, become a lot stronger as an entire industry, and build standards to provide confidence and comfort to the guest that this is a viable product besides hotels and other products. One thing just quick on Focusrite, the last Focusrite study has shown that 70% of people who do not rent, they do not rent because of safety and security. So if we address that piece, we can address 100% of the travelers.
Great. Thank you so much, Simon. Pierre, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd say, to bounce back on what Simon said, I'd say something that has changed and will change again is our addressable market. So, we took our market for granted. We just I think nobody could really imagine that, it could disappear during 2 months completely. Now, part of it is back, but the international part of it is still very weak. And I think, in the long term, like Simon said, I think we're going to, benefit from what has happened, because a lot of people who've not considered doing it for a long time are now back at it. Or we are seeing like the most valuable option for your travel, because amenities to stay longer, you can stay a bit more isolated. So a lot of people who never used it will actually use it this summer and probably in the next month. So I think I will consider that. And I think on the long run, it's definitely a benefit for us. So our addressable market should increase on the long term. So I'm very bullish about that part.
Great. And Tim?
Yeah, from my perspective, I'm really interested to see what happens in terms of our global relationship with cities. It's just like, I can tell you, sitting downtown Los Angeles right now, surrounded by very, very high population density in the midst of a pandemic, I feel nervous every day. And that's not something that I've experienced, living in big urban areas for, the last 10 or 15 years. And so I wonder if just like that generalized anxiety that I feel around, going outside and worrying about the coronavirus, I wonder if that's going to translate into, a broader shift to like more leisure travel in general. And like, our company is going to spend the money to bring people together in the same city with as much frequency if we're all more comfortable on Zoom and things like that now. So I am also concerned about my urban markets and how they're going to fare over the next 5 years or so. But I'm also curious about how we as a human race are going to shift and adapt to this thing that's happened to all of us. So I'm curious and cautiously optimistic that we'll all be able to adapt and shift the industry as global travel patterns shift as well.
Thank you, Tim. We are past the hour, but I'd like to extend it by 10 more minutes to try to address some of your questions. The audience is very engaged, and whoever would like to stick around for those questions is welcome. And I'll try to start with the questions that were raised by several people. So a few people asked about cleaning procedures, and particularly, how do you highlight to guests that that the suite is disinfected, any extra signs you should provide to create more assurance with your guests. And another question relating to cleaning is also, how do you price that? How do you take that into account, the fact that you do have to invest more in cleaning? Who would like to take that question? Pierre?
Yeah, sure. I mean, my point of view is that now high cleaning fee is just something positive. It's not a bad thing. And, Tim was explaining really well how at the end, these are listing sites and, advertisement sites for our properties. And I think, it's one way to promote that we really care about the standards that Simon mentioned. So in my opinion, nowadays having a high cleaning fee just shows that you care. And I think you could, include that into your descriptions or have maybe one picture about it to make sure that you're going to dedicate special attention to making sure, the property is going to be up to the standard of cleanliness and also that your staff is safe, etc. So I think for me, high cleaning fee might not be something we shy about and something we should even praise, in my opinion.
Simon, please.
I totally agree. And at this time, I agree with Pierre. So it's so boring that we constantly agree. But no, I totally agree. But one thing we need to be careful, don't raise the rates and don't do anything. I mean, that is stupid. And that will backfire heavily. So we being a CEO myself and being a chairman of a company where I need to introduce workplace standards as well in terms of cleanliness and everything else, you're a fool if you don't follow them, even though you're saying you do, towards your staff and also towards your guests. So for guests, it's more difficult. So I would even provide sanitation material as well in the property on top of what you have done in cleaning, and then I would also share your checklists that your cleaning people have gone through on arrival for the people to see what has been done. So just by simply raising fees, it's super dangerous, and I totally agree with Pierre. I think consumers are more than ready to do that and also accept those, but we need to be able to give them the confidence that this has actually been done. Disinfection of all the light switches, the remote controls, all the stuff that people obviously touch as well. And, even I have a property manager in Italy he's a 5-star, 4-star property manager. He's providing the bed linen in the bag. He doesn't even put the bed linen on the beds and say the customer can do it himself. So we need to give the choice to the customer. And I think in this particular case, even customers will be willing to say, okay, I accept these standards, and I believe they have been met, but I'm also happy just do a bit of cleaning on my own just to feel comfortable. And, this is what we do, right? Wherever we go, we disinfect our hands whenever we feel like it. And this has changed in our daily lives. So I think we need to give our consumer even more choice. Yes, they will be happy to pay more. We need to prove in a way that we have done our job, but also give them the choice to maybe even clean more just to feel comfortable in where they're at.
Thank you, Simon. Another question that I think applies to all of you: how do you recommend diversifying our marketing strategies as a result of the situation? Tim.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I don't think that you should. Because it's like it then becomes so much more to manage. And it's like, do we really think that the emails that we're sending out from like our individual company, like, can we compete with all of that Airbnb was doing? Like, I don't think so. Especially because we can manipulate we can manipulate the page rank algorithms on the OTAs just by changing our rate. It's like, that's like one person sitting down and like, controlling one thing. That's incredibly powerful. And you don't have to like come up with content. You don't have to like remain fresh. You don't have to like maintain a MailChimp account or like any of that kind of stuff. And so like, I understand the impulse that's like, we have to do whatever we can. We have to exhaust every resource that we have. But like, honestly, I don't think that you can get a better bang for buck than like being the top listing in your area on Airbnb and Booking.com. Like, if you've got that, then you're going to be making your money like way more than if you're trying to do your direct marketing and stuff like that. Now, I'll also say that is a very like urban perspective. It's a very like dense portfolio, North American perspective. So I totally acknowledge that. But in general, for people who are trying to be super, super efficient, I say just focus on the OTAs and like really focus on manipulating it with your rate schedule.
Okay, I would say that we've seen different things from our clients. We've seen a lot of them, especially because the demand all of a sudden became domestic instead of international for many. It means marketing to a different audience, as Pierre mentioned earlier. And we did see success with actually reaching out through in social channels to local communities, focusing on local events and taking a more domestic approach to marketing. And we have, especially if you want to move to monthly rentals and look at, are there students around? Are there like other types of audiences around that would be looking for short-term or midterm stays at this time? So we actually have seen some changes in marketing strategies for our clients. Simon, I see you've been trying to say something as well.
It's good. Absolutely. I totally agree. I think, in terms of marketing strategy, what we said before, it's now time to sort of review a lot. But I think people always just think about ourselves. We always go back in our comfort zone, right? And building a different marketing strategy is a lot of effort, a lot of work, a lot of know-how, and a lot of other things. So I think, we will go back pretty much into our own comfort zone again, and therefore take what we get with the least effort that we can, which I think is dangerous, to be perfectly honest. So if I could suggest anything to the audience out there, is really to rethink your marketing strategy overall. I think it's actually easier to attract guests than what people think, especially engaging with the ones who have been there. Is pretty simple as well, and I think there's an opportunity to fight the margin compression and be more profitable going forward.
And maybe if I jump on that one, I'd say I think it's been an interesting time to test out ideas. I know it obviously the day-to-day has been changed completely, but it was not a bad time to test. So for instance, on search engine marketing, so for instance Google Ads, prices have dropped because the competition was much lower. So Airbnb announced that they cut most of their marketing campaigns. So similarly, a lot of companies also stopped paying for ads, and I think that the cost dropped, and it was an occasion to sort of test out some ideas. And doing this exercise, you might not want to be doing it constantly because you might not have the resources to do so, but it's interesting to look for it, do a bit of research. And I think if you put 20 euro in Google, you get like $100 coupon. And that's enough to do tests, and you will see what people are searching, what are the keywords that are important, and maybe it gives you ideas for the future, or like Vered say, maybe you find that students are a great targeting audience that you haven't looked into, or whatever it can be. I think it's always interesting to do research if you have the time to do so.
Very interesting and creative idea, Pierre. Thank you. Before we end, we'd like you to participate in a very short poll that will be showed on the screen right now. Appreciate all of you helping us in responding to the poll. Thanks, everyone. You're welcome to continue and address the poll while I try to address one more question. Pierre, a lot of people are asking questions about data in different regions in Mexico and south of Spain. Can you refer them to where they can find data about those locations, so we don't take up all the time of the panel? But can you just give us some idea of how they can either contact you or follow up through transparent page on regional data?
Sure. And you can go on ctransparent.com and leave out your email, and we'll have a free demo or a free call about your market. You can also go on our COVID page, and we've got around 200 markets covered. And I saw a question about Africa, and I have to say I'm ashamed because I don't have anything off the shelf in there. Definitely reach out to me. Also, my email is pierre@ctransparent.com, and we'll look into it together.
Okay, thank you so much, Pierre. I don't want to take a lot of your time because we're already a lot over the hour. Just have a lot of questions for the audience. We will be linking our panelists' websites with our recap of the event and the recording. So you can, I'm sure, feel free to reach out to them with any follow-up questions or anything we haven't managed to address. I'd like to thank our panelists for a very interesting and helpful panel. Wish you all the best, and hopefully we will continue to see recovery of our space. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Pierre, and thank you, Tim.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Vered.
everyone.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Guesty. Really appreciate it. It was great.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys.
Thank you, everyone.